Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of Quizzing Cameron, where I take your management and leadership questions and answer them in a straightforward and practical way. No theory or buzzwords here, just straightforward advice from my 20 years of experience. So if you have a question that you want to ask, go ahead and drop down into the replies of this video and ask the question, and I'll be sure to get it on a future episode. I will be answering every single question, so fear not on that. Keep tuning in and you'll see your question answered. So let's go ahead and dive into this episode. Our first question comes from Angel, and it's a great one. It's help with being the only female leader in a male-dominated work environment. And Angel, I know you're not alone in this sort of struggle. Slowly but surely, we've seen that the leadership and management ranks for women have increased over the years, but there's still definitely a skewing towards the males. So this isn't something that you're dealing with alone, as I'm sure you're well aware of. My advice to female leaders is always be yourself. Every single leader is different. Every single male leader is different. Every single female leader is different. And so what you want to do is you want to play to your strengths. If you're a great communicator, then you want to be communicating as much as possible. If you're great at receiving feedback or analytics, then that's what you should go ahead and focus on from a leadership standpoint. You want to play to your strengths, and you don't want to fall back on, oh, well, females are more creative, or they're better talkers or listeners. You don't want to play into any of those stereotypes. Be yourself. Play to your strengths, and you'll see that that is a much more natural way for you to grow as a leader. And I think you'll find that you're more successful as a leader to try to play to your strengths, just like every single leader should. So I hope that's helpful, Angel. Question number 2 for today comes from Cathleen. And it asks, what about a hypocritical manager who talks down to you, but there are others that work below your production average who are idolized? Thanks for the question, Kathleen. That's great, and I'm sorry that you find yourself in that sort of situation. What I find when I've experienced those situations where I don't feel like I'm getting a fair shake from my boss, that they don't see where my value is and where I'm really excelling, yet they seem to notice every little thing that somebody else does right, is I try to carve out my niche. So find a way within your operation to really be the expert and start small, start with that niche, and then from that you then become a resource to your peers. So what your leader will see is that you are the expert in this particular area. They can talk about somebody else in another area all they want, but you've really carved out this great niche where even those other people that they talk about more are actually coming to you for advice. And then what you do with that niche is you then expand it out. And so that's how you get the leader's attention first and foremost, because you just aren't getting the right positive attention for whatever reason, and I will not go into the bevy of reasons that a leader might not notice somebody in their talent. But you can go ahead and get that niche, expand it out, be the resource to other people, and then they can't really avoid not noticing you, certainly in that area. So start small, expand out from there. It's a tough spot, Kathleen, and I'm sorry you're going through it, but hopefully that'll help. Our third question today comes from Shara, and it's, how can you ensure consistency with accountability among all team members? And that's a great question for any leader, Shara. And what I always say is get clear on expectations first. Your team needs to be absolutely crystal clear on what your expectations are, whether it be from a sales perspective, whether it be from whatever the metrics are that you look at, a customer experience perspective, accolades, order processing, any of those things. You have to be absolutely clear on what your expectations are and what the thresholds are for doing an acceptable job. Once you set those, then you get into the whole consistency, the accountability aspect of it, and that's where you can't be afraid to discipline individuals, or at least have that heart-to-heart talk with them and say, you're falling below the threshold, you're not meeting the expectations that I've clearly set, and that helps that discourse along, because if you've been clear, they don't have any gray area or fuzziness to fall back on. They know what you've said, they understand what you've said, they understand what the expectation is, and if they're not meeting it and you can clearly show that they're not meeting it, well, then you've opened up that discussion where you break down those defensive walls and you can start working with your team member to get them above the threshold that you're looking for. And what I always say with this is, you have to follow it through religiously. You have to, your best team members, your worst team members, if anybody falls below that, you have to follow through on that. And I've experienced this before where I've set certain parameters for how certain functions were done, and there was resistance from my team. And it took actually suspending one of my best individuals for one day to get everybody's attention. And it had carried on up until that point, but I tell you, once I suspended that individual who I absolutely did not want to lose off of my team, the instances of failure in that area dropped down to next to nothing. I would deal with that on now a monthly basis with a particular individual, and I would rarely see it again from that individual once everybody knew that we were serious about it. The last thing is, and what I recommend is, if it's a performance standpoint, if it's not a compliance is more legalistic and safety, financial management, financial risk management, that sort of thing. If it's more performance related, I always say throw it up there publicly. If you're not comfortable with that, then there's employee numbers that you can use or code names or what have you. But post it up publicly so that everybody can see how everybody else is doing from a performance standpoint. And this holds them accountable from a peer pressure standpoint, not taking the workplace back to middle school or anything like that, but get that peer pressure going, and they can clearly see then where they fall. They may think that they are doing absolutely fantastically, and then they find they're in the middle of the pack when they look up on the board. Or they might think that they're doing terrible, and you find out that they're in the top 5. So that sort of accountability, they see it, and even though everybody might not know who everybody is on that particular list, if you've chosen to hide it for whatever reason, they at least, there's still that subconscious belief that everybody knows where they're at. So that helps with accountability. So get clear on expectations, crystal clear on expectations. Have those one-on-ones or disciplines if need be. Follow through religiously with everybody, your worst performers, your best performers, and then get public with it if you can. Those are the things that hold everybody to a consistent expectation and hold them accountable for it. And that's always my advice for leaders when they start looking at these sort of things. So thank you very much for the question, Shara. That was a great one. Our next one comes from Gina, and it is, how do you handle an insubordinate and lying coworker who no one in management or HR will do anything about? Everybody is going to come across those at some point in their career, Gina, and it's inevitable. You know, whether it is personality conflicts or just a bad seed that's been let into the organization. And what I always want to be clear on is HR and management will do very little for interpersonal conflicts. If you have a problem with somebody on a personal level, they will do very little. That is just people clashing, personalities clashing. Where they will start doing something is if that person is doing something procedurally that is not right. Now, if you have an ethical code of conduct in your policy and procedure manual for your company, which many companies do, then you may have a little bit more grounds as far as that interpersonal conflict stuff goes. But other than mediating some sort of conflict resolution between the two of you, that's about as far as HR and management will go with that. Now, if you do have some sort of procedural breakdown with this person, then you can start looking to document it wherever possible. HR and management needs a strong footing before they ever let anybody go or ever take any sort of disciplinary action, because if that's contested, they need to show where it's from, and they need proof. It's not quite as bad as a court of law, but somewhere along those lines is the best way to think about it. And it's best if it doesn't just come from you. If it comes from multiple people, then you have a little bit more of a leg to stand on. But you need to look for those substantive policy breaches and document those wherever you can, and that will hopefully get you where you need to be and turn that other person around. Otherwise, it's conflict resolution between the two of you, and I would encourage you to seek to build those bridges. I've facilitated that with my team members many times, and it's not always possible, but you can at least reach some sort of amicable agreement if it's brought out into the light. So do lean on HR and management for those. Realize that there's nothing from a disciplinary standpoint that's going to happen if it's not some sort of policy breach. And take those measures if you need to, Gina. But thank you very much for the question. Our last question for today comes from Melinda, and it's, How do you get your main office or headquarters attention when you and your staff are at a satellite office? Out of sight, out of mind? Melinda, it's in today's wired world, that's a very common thing. I've actually had it in my work experience 3 times where I've been away from the main office, the main headquarters, or where all the action is taking place. And you really do have to have some sort of PR campaign to let them know what's going on, let them know about your successes. They won't see it, they won't walk by. It's one of those things you have to just carve out time for in your day. And so you can go ahead and send out weekly, emails of successes to your boss or your boss's peers or your peers at the main headquarters. You can do that as well, so you can let them know kind of a weekly update from the branch office, that sort of thing, and let them know what's going on so that they feel like they're in the loop. But what I also recommend and what's worked really well for me in the past is actually some sort of departmental sharing. If you're not in the same city, it's probably not going to happen. But if you are in the same city, where you can go ahead and swap workers with another department at the main office. They can come out, they can shadow, they can understand what it is that you're doing out there, and then they can be a champion for you back at the main office. It doesn't mean it has to be the entire department. I always took volunteers, and I didn't have any lack of interest in being a volunteer to shadow somebody for a day as opposed to work at their job. But switch it out, do half a dozen people, a few people. It doesn't take much for the social people at the main office to see what you're doing and take it back to their coworkers and their peers. And I think that those weekly emails, those weekly updates, and that sort of visiting, sharing sort of thing can really be a benefit to help the whole organization understand what's going on out there. But know that you are going to have to expend some effort on it. It sounds from the question like you are willing to take that effort, and so I wish you the best with those couple of ideas that I had. So that'll close it out for episode 7. I can't believe we're already at episode 7. If you have any questions, again, that you wanted to ask, go ahead and drop those down in the replies. I'll go ahead and throw them into the queue of questions that I'll be answering, and I really appreciate it. And from sunny Las Vegas today, I'm signing off. Have a good one.